Well, Tom, as this topic of credibility, we're going to hear it from, or I want us hearing it from two angles. One, as recipients of this, we are all marketed to by any variety of influencers and leaders. And so we can all chime in. That's what most people did in the response here, chime in to say what hurts credibility from the people marketing to them. But as so many of our audience are influencing others, they have big and small audiences. They're making the effort to write a book, host a podcast, have a website, have a product, whatever they need to be hearing this, we do, and realize what hurts our credibility and how we can be more credible, because I think there's a lot of people with good hearts. Tom, I know you like me, we grew up in this industry. We've seen people with good hearts who had bad tactics, poor tactics that hurt their credibility. And it was a shame, because people do judge a book by its cover, and people aren't going to engage with a message. They're going to miss out because it was promoted poorly. And that's as you know, we're going to hit on some of the topics. It's sometimes a fine line to how do you promote and be credible and authentic. It can be a slippery slope.
Absolutely. We're already getting some comments here.
Yeah.
Lack of consistency from Carlo, and Marnie says, "Hey, you got to walk the talk." So, yeah. And this is a big one, but I know that we've got some specific questions that let's just dig in, Kevin, and go through them question by question.
We are. And I'm hoping that as you think about this, as folks are hearing this and think, oh gosh, this is what hurts credibility, I hope we hit those topics. We got a lot of feedback. We did group some of the comments together. So let's just start off right off the top, and we'll hit some of the groupings. And I'll tell you, one that came across a lot was profanity. Interesting topic to hit on here, Tom, because there are absolutely people who I know and I respect as leaders and influencers who curse. They do it on their blogs, on their podcasts, in their books, even. And I think we've seen a rise in that. Now, I would have to also point out that we have a more conservative, faith-based audience overall. So it's going to be maybe more of a sticking point with them than another audience. But here, let me just throw some of these at you, Tom. David Treese, he says, I listen to Joe Rogan, which, if you don't know Joe Rogan, #1 podcast on planet Earth. He's been doing it forever, and he literally does. I mean, he generally has the top ranked podcast on the planet. He says, but David says, I listen to Joe Rogan when he has somebody I'm familiar with. I don't listen to him more often because of his excessive cursing. It's one thing to occasionally curse. It's another thing when it's repetitive. Tony Banning says, language. I don't care how smart people are. If they cuss, they have little regard for those listening and the young people they are feeding. Jake Fox says, profanity. And Eric Vietz right after says, yeah, in general, I'd agree. It depends on how it's used. Maybe for Gary Vaynerchuk, it is part of his brand and draws a specific set of clients. And Gary is known for his more than colorful language, for sure. Timothy Driver, I'm definitely turned off by any podcast or books where curse words are used. A good leadership book should not have those words in it. And I want to come back to him talking about leadership. So lots of people, Ben Kaiser, cursing repeated and repetitively, it just turns me off. Tom, I mean, you grew up with your dad on stage, and he was on stage with lots of people, and lots of some people who had some colorful language as well. Of course, I think anybody who knows Zig knows that he did not. And I'll say on that side, we're talking about cursing. One of the things that Zig's known for is he was coached early on to, don't talk about God when you're on stage, and he chose to. And obviously it worked for him. I think some people think of cursing that way. Oh, you shouldn't do it. And they feel like, hey, it's more authentic. So give them the Ziglar perspective on it, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a phrase that I heard that I'm reading a book, and it said, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I was raised in the power of words. Words have unbelievable power. And so not only is profanity or cursing something that at best is questionable, so is, other things, sarcasm, speaking down to someone, using derogatory slurs, or, those are kind of obvious these days. They're getting called out all the time. one of the reports that I read is that in every act of violence, like in police reports, when you get into them, something like 99% of all violent acts are preceded by profanity, right? There's cursing, there's that anger that comes out. And then dad had he had this simple comment. He said, I've never heard of a speaker who got invited to speak specifically because they were so excited they cussed all the time.
Oh.
Right? They've never had nobody's ever said, you can come speak, but you gotta cuss a little bit.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. But I can tell you numerous people who have lost segments of society with their profanity. And so my question is it good? Is it pure? Is it powerful? Does it lift someone up? Now, I'm not blind either, okay? Or maybe in this context, I should say I'm not deaf either. So, because, we hear it. I was in my early 20s and dad was speaking to a big organization, and it was their big conference. They had about 1,000 people there. We were back in the green room with the executives of this company, and dad was talking to them. And this was the oil and gas industry. The executives had been out in the oil well and the oil fields, kind of a roughneck, kind of very, very intense. A lot of them former military. I think maybe the CEO was ex-Marine or something like. Well, you're never an ex-Marine, but you know what I mean. Just the greatest people in the world. But man, did they cuss in the back room. And at that age, I'd never really been experienced to that. Okay. I hadn't heard it. And so when dad and I had a private moment, I said, Dad, what's with all this language? And he looked at me and this is what he said. He said, son, two things. First thing is this: never dismiss somebody's intelligence because of the language they choose to use. He said, you can learn a lot from them. There's a lot of things that they know and do very well. And so don't ever just eliminate somebody completely because of the language they use. And then he said this, he said, isn't it a shame that because they choose to use that type of language, they're going to alienate some people without even intending to? And I think that to me is wisdom, right? Why would we use language that would interfere with building a relationship and helping someone go to the next level? And then I've heard other experts say, well, I use, profanity to shock people, to get their attention, to get a shift in the way they think. And you know what? I think there might be a time for that, like right before you go into battle and your life is on the line. If you're a general and that's what you do, I'm not saying don't do it, right? I'm saying there might be a time. But if you're a professional speaker or expert author who is there to help other people grow, I think there are more effective ways than that don't have the downside. When you hear that kind of language, for some people, the only time they ever experienced that language was in a traumatic environment, and that creates an issue all its own.
Man, I appreciate what you said. You said the word, does it lift? And that's what I thought of too. We're talking about a professional arena. We're not talking about people's homes. This is people who influence you, market to you. What takes away credibility. And cursing profanity was the topic, but you just saying that made me thought, are your words are so powerful. Are they life-giving or life-taking? And you mentioned that, sarcasm, talking down. And I thought anything that's blaming, accusing, criticizing, which our media is so full of right now. And generally, if somebody's doing that, they lose credibility for me, whether it's a curse word or sarcasm, criticism, whatever. So are your words lifting or are they life-giving or life-taking? That's my kids. One of the songs we used to listen to on the way to school was Speak Life by Toby Mac. Our words speaking like. But a couple things on this, I've had people who think it's shock value. It's being authentic. It helps them, resonate with their audience. But I have never known anybody who was offended or put off by somebody because he said, I like the guy, but he just didn't cuss. Never heard that. Just like you talked about, never heard that. And have absolutely heard the others where, gosh, I just, the cursing offended. So from a personal, from a marketing standpoint, if I want people to engage with my message, it's the stats are the stats. I'm going to have more people engaged by not cursing than if I do. I'm not going to offend anybody by not. And I'm going to be, man, when I talk, I mean, even like on here, I am expressive. I am emotive. Words are powerful, but yeah, like you said, Tom, I just have never had a need to use a curse word. But as the guy talked about with Joe Rogan, and I've heard this with Gary Vaynerchuk and some other people, Gary Vaynerchuk has some great messages. Joe Rogan, he's an interesting interviewer, but he's really not there to change lives or lift people up. He's there for entertainment. And that's a great method or a great way to look at it right there. Are you there for interest and entertainment? Or are you there for leadership and influence? If you're there for interest and entertainment, I don't think it's as big a deal. If you're over here and you really want to be a leader and influencer, generally there's not a great place for again, any of these life-taking words or profanity, even more so in personal development. I've seen some people in business development get away with it more so than personal. When it's personal development, boy, it generally is going to leave it's going to hurt credibility. And then just on the repetition, this is one that gets me, that I don't understand, because I've seen people in leadership roles who not only curse, but just use it over and over and over again. That's just weird to me, because from a professional standpoint, I don't want any word used excessively. I mean, if I sat here, Tom, and I talked about, man, this is going to be an awesome show. We've got an awesome guest, and man, I've got an awesome response here. And this is just all. And about the seventh time I say it, does the guy know any other adjectives? He must
Right.
not be very, very well versed in verbiage, in the English language. That is weird to me. And so you get somebody who uses the F word over and over and over. I'm thinking, my gosh, is it just, you seem very limited in your vernacular.
That's right. And when we train speakers at our Ziglar Speakers Institute, what we call that is padding. And we know the common padding words, so, all these words that are common, a descriptor that's common. And padding always gets in the way of your core message.
Yeah.
And they've got their own vocabulary. And so their padding word might be unique to them, and it can be profanity. I will say this is that I've spoken all over the world. In different cultures, there are different words, and in a culture, a word might have more meaning or less meaning. But I've never gotten into trouble with having the mindset of the approach of hey, I'm going to respect everybody in the room. If an 80-year-old grandmother is in the room with her 8-year-old great granddaughter, I'm going to use language that's going to respect both of them.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're going to do. Now, I have been in countries where they'll joke and they'll say, well, cussing here is like a sport, right? I mean, it's just part of it is. And so what you've got to understand is that it maybe in that culture, the words don't mean quite the same thing. They're not as derogatory. They don't have the same connotation. But I've never gotten in trouble by staying away from those words, even in those countries.
Yeah.
And so that's where we came from it. And one of the things when we have our Ziglar Legacy certification, when we certify somebody to teach our material, we have a code of ethics that we give to them when they graduate. And one of it is they're never going to use any profanity or tell any questionable jokes, because we want to set the standard as high as possible. This is what I've discovered, whether you're a parent in your own household, whether you're going out to develop your own self in your own career, or you're trying to build something in a business, the higher you set your standard, the better chance you have of success. And so we set a high standard.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that about being just aware of your audience. And you know what, I'll call somebody out because he'll appreciate it. Christopher Lockhead, who we both know, and he's got the book Play Bigger, and his other book, Niche Down. And we've had him on the show. He has a podcast that's done really well. And he he uses profanity pretty frequently there. And when he came to be on the Ziglar Show, though, he said, hey, I want you to know, I honor the house that I'm in. and he knew where we stood. And we've had different people on the show, especially in the past, who in other formats have some colorful language and haven't here. I can think of one guest who we had to do a decent amount. I could have just not run the show, but again, it was a good message. And we did do probably 5 bleeps where we bleeped it out. But generally I cover that up front. I want to hit on what you said though, Tom, on padding, because somebody said, Christine Odell, she said, this isn't exactly what you're talking about for padding, but some of these things that are just get overused. Let's just say that, repetitive and overused. She said when they say, and she's, of course, as we record right now, we're amidst the COVID-19, pandemic of 2020. And so in response to that, she's saying right now, when people start off their message saying in these trying times, I turn it off immediately. So Dan Brandenburg, and Dan was a member of an organization that I led years ago, neat guy. And he says, based on that, I started a list of these overused phrases. He says, in times like these, he's got all these in quotes, in these uncertain times, in these trying times, we must do our part. We will get through this together. The new normal. Our world is suddenly different. We will come together. Everyone working hard to keep us safe. In these unprecedented times, despite everything that has changed, one thing hasn't. Our priority is to keep you safe in this unprecedented time. Flatten the curve. I mean, how many times have you seen or heard that? And again, for us to think of, man, if we're talking to an audience, and this kind of came under the category of just canned stuff. And I'll say this: people are we get so much input. Everybody is reading, listening, and watching constantly. And we have become so sensitive and so tuned in that we can smell something inauthentic a mile away. And I'll say one overarching feeling that I want people to understand from this is you will be found out. For better or worse, you are going to be found out. And if you are just putting out canned stuff and saying these repetitive things, man, I think people smell it a mile away more than ever. They are more and more attuned to it. And authenticity is the word that gets used so much. That's a great Gen X, phrase. They want somebody authentic. And I think it's a good call for all of us just to question, are we putting out authentic? Are we being authentic? Are we putting out authentic information? Are we just regurgitating stuff? And that got talked about a lot in this thread of when it feels like, somebody is just stating the same stuff that I heard over here. And Tom, I question myself sometimes with that. If I'm having somebody who I'm interviewing, who I know has been interviewed a lot, what am I going to pull out different or better? And if I can't, maybe I shouldn't do it. Find somebody different. It really calls us all to the mat of, do we have anything unique to offer or to say?
Yeah. And then, is there anything new under the sun?
Which the answer is no.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. You just said that. Let me pull this out. This came from, let me see if I can find it here. Came from my dad, Dan Miller. Let me see if I can find him here, because he kind of hit on that aspect that you hear again, these commonly said things of, hey, here's a new secret. I've got the secret, never before heard of thing. And as Solomon said a long time ago, there's nothing new under the sun. Do we have anything that at this point is really a secret that's never been divulged before? But I should say, Tom, we can have a new perspective, a perspective relevant to a new time, a new voice, a new flavor. And I do want people to hear that, because is there anything that we can talk about or write about that has not been talked about or written about before? No, but these are new times. There's people who haven't heard those. People are born, they grow up, and they aren't privy to them. So there's a responsibility and an opportunity to bring a message to them. But my gosh, it's, and on that, there's to give credit where credit is due. And I hear you do that a lot, Tom. You're consistently telling stories. Man, I heard this from this person. I read this from this person, and giving credit. And I saw somebody, a fairly big personality recently, who was called out for making some claims or saying some statements that was found to be from somebody else. And they just didn't give credit where credit was due. Boy, talk about losing credibility quick.
Yeah. Dad always said that, he quotes people all the time. That was his thing. And he said, I quote him for 2 reasons. Number one, it's the right thing to do. If you if you get a phrase or a line or a thought or something that's, that an author has kind of made famous, or they're known for it, it's the right thing to give them credit.
Yeah.
And number two, if it's ever proven wrong, it's not your fault. So it's like you got both sides covered there.
Yeah, absolutely. On this aspect of being authentic, literally people, Jeff Bayless, he says, not being authentic. Jessica Smith Morris, she says, not being sincere and real. And I actually asked, I'm not going to drop names here. I actually asked Jessica, she's a Ziglar Legacy certified trainer, who she was talking about. She said there's a personality in particular right now that she's really disappointed with. And I asked her about it because I wanted to know. And it's a big name out there. And it's someone who was really holding up their marriage as part of their brand. I'll say that, part of their brand. And I've seen that. We see people who hold up their marriage, their family, their faith, their political leanings, their, yada, yada, different aspects of their person that they hold up as part of their brand. My gosh, I talk about family and marriage a lot, but I don't really hold it up as part of my brand. So this was a personality who held their marriage up and was doing that up until all of a sudden bomb dropped and divorce is happening. And so to their followers, it seemed disingenuous there. Not that, every person, we can't have perfect personalities out there, and you're going to have one that's going to have problems some area. And I think you as the personality have to just see, how can you be authentic? I mean, if you are, going to going through a financial time, do you share that with your audience, a financial downfall or a relational downfall or whatever? Do you share that? I think you got to weigh that especially if it comes into line with something that you are holding up as part of your platform, man, that is dangerous. My gosh. I mean, your dad, the amount of time that he spent talking about his marriage, the redhead, your mom, if he had then a failing in that would have been massive, because he used that as part of his platform, almost to the point of, my gosh, if you're a personality out there, let's just use marriage as a muse, and your marriage isn't where you would like it to be. Maybe it's not one of the highlights of your life. I said, well, then don't pretend that it is. Don't come off as it is. You don't have to go and talk about that you got a struggling marriage, but my gosh, don't hold that up. So we do need to be authentic, be honest to that degree.
Yeah. And, I see it a lot. Marriage is one. I think faith is another, where people will, from the stage, from their platform, they'll talk about their faith, and they'll make certain claims. And then off the stage, they're not kind. They're not considerate.
Yeah.
They're arrogant. Their head can barely fit through the door. We call it speakeritis. Speakeritis is when you start believing all the press clippings and all the great things that people say about you, and your head swells up. And so
yeah.
And so there's a lot of fantastic, great communicators with amazing material, and they get speakeritis, and then eventually their career goes away. And it's because eventually people go, wait a second, if that was true, why don't you live that way? And it's a dangerous thing. And so, Mike, over and over again, people say, well, whatever do you walk the talk? So one of my friends, he was a consultant for our company, or with us. I engaged him to do something, and we became friends, and he helped me through some trying times. His name is Dr. Clifton Jolly. And when Dad was sick and passed away, he said, your dad walked his talk, and he was a really good talker. And so think about that, because what he was saying is he was a really good walker.
Yeah.
Right. He lived that example out. And that's the thing is, authenticity, transparency is, I would tell people, nobody can be Zig Ziglar on stage. You can take any of the top speakers in the world. If you want to copy them and do what they do, good luck. It's not going to happen, right? They're unique, and they've got a style and a personality and a presentation, and it all comes together in a unique package. You can't be the next whoever that person is. Zig Ziglar, or anybody, but you can be this. So when Dad would finish speaking, he would often autograph for a couple of hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I got thousands of emails and Facebook messages and all these different things from people who said, "Hey, I heard your dad speak." And when it was done, I stood now in line for a couple of hours. And when I had that 1 minute with your dad, even though it was 1 minute, it was like I was the only person in the room.
Yeah.
And so what did that mean? Okay. They were people, what people do when they see somebody in front of a group or an author online on a webinar and they go, "Man, this message is amazing." When they actually travel to go to meet that person one-on-one, the test is, are they the same or better or worse when I'm in a casual conversation with them? And so that then validifies or invalidates their message. And so all these people would say, it was like I was the only person in the room when they met with Dad. So here's the thing. Regardless of the size of your platform, you can all be Zig Ziglar off stage. You can all treat each person you're with kindness and respect and a full attention.
And that's my story. I was 16 years old at a conference, probably in Nashville, and stood in line, and Zig Ziglar signed my performance planner and looked me in the eye and made me feel that way. And as I've shared before, my dad got us into working the tables in the back of the room, or, outside of the arena, for a lot of the influencers. We get in for free, we get to meet them and all these things. And so I saw behind the scenes, and it was, I was a bit dismayed by a lot of the personalities who were flashy and amazing on stage, and off stage, man, they did not have a heart that you would hope for. And Zig stood out, and lo and behold, here I am all these years later, hosting the Zig Ziglar Show. And it's a big part of it. Yeah. And my dad, he was the one who put in here, "I'm going to share these secrets never before revealed," that he says hurts credibility. Colin Martin here says, "No real message other than cliches and platitudes." Renee Schultz, "It feels impersonal and only directed often at the masses." Extraordinary claims without an organic online footprint of results and achievement. Dennis Durrell, this is good. He says, "If it's new, it ain't true. And if it's true, it ain't new. Those who promise revolutionary ideas seldom deliver." And it goes on and on and on. So, people can get into trouble. We have a lot of business leaders out there, right? I mean, you do that. You lead. I lead more in the personal development space. You do there too, but you do a lot of business leading. You and Howard Partridge do. And when we go, and especially, and you guys don't do this as much, but especially some of the online marketing leaders who tell you, "Hey, here's a tried and true formula and procedure to go out there and to have an offering, an online offering, and do well." Those are great. I mean, those are great. We're talking about franchises in essence, turnkey system. Those are good, but you can fall into trouble if you're copying too directly and you're just, again, regurgitating the same thing that's already out there. That happens a lot, and it really clutters up the space out there. We had a lot of people just say, there's so much noise coming from everybody. It's so difficult. And when you're not having something very authentic, it looks like everything else that's out there. Again, I think people are just tuning into it more and more and more. So looking at, it's one thing to model. That's good. We want to model what works. It's another thing just to copy and to put a different face on something else out there. It's just, again, you see it so much, Tom, and it can be a slippery slope. That just right there. How do you, that's a valid question. How do you model what's working, but be unique? You've got to answer that question.
Here's what I think, and for everybody who's looking at different programs or systems, and there's some fantastic ones out there from people, and from people that are, quite frankly, not that well known. And then there's some ones that are they're not good, right? Yeah. And some of those are from brand names, and some of them are for people you haven't heard. And here's just a basic question. Is the system, the funnel, what we talk about in marketing, is the way they get the word out and then bring people in and then share the message and then get them to engage and convert and become a customer, is the eventual output of the system to enhance a personal relationship with that organization where they really want to get to know you and you're a human being and you're an individual and they have things in place to answer your unique questions? Or is the system put in place so that they'll never have to deal with you, right? So that they don't have to, quote unquote, waste their time with anybody other than the people who fit into the 80% who were just going to go through it and really not have engagement. Organizations that are focused on building relationships with individuals and other companies, and they look right in your eye when they talk to you, whether it's online or face to face, and they want you to be a part of their community for a long time, and they start to know the names of your family and your kids and your goals and all that, whether it's a sales system or a marketing system or a business platform, whatever it is, that's who you want to do business with. And you may or may not connect with their style and their personality and their approach because everybody's different. That's okay. But what's the end result? What do they want? They want to see you win, right? They want to see you win.
Yeah, we mentioned in not such a positive light, Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a very well-known, business leader these days. But I do remember early on in his career, as he was kind of coming to fame, and he did a lot of online engagement, going into groups and connecting with people. And he said, man, it was not, people ask him, how do you scale that? He says, it wasn't scalable. It wasn't tenable, but I did it for a time. I killed myself for a time, connecting with each and every comment, knowing the person, caring about them. And he says, I did it. And I stayed up all night sometimes trying to do that, but it paid off because it was, as you said, it was real. It was caring. It was true. It wasn't just some gimmick of how can I make the most splash with the least amount of work. And we do have to be scalable. We do have to have lives and whatnot too, but my gosh, yeah, there's so much out there, as you said, Tom, where these systems are built up and it's kind of how can you get the most bang for your buck and just regurgitate something over here, make money and not really engage with the people. Cindy Snipes here, she says, what hurts credibility for her? Trying to talk when people talk over your head, they're not relatable. And when they promote their items over the content they promised would be in their book or podcast or blog. I had a mentor I loved, then it became about all her side projects like perfume and clothing, etc. And I preferred her in the coaching environment. She had real usable content then. Tom, what's the ratio of, and I know what you should do on Facebook or in your own promotions or emails or whatever, there's kind of a ratio that's played with on how many offerings of content of giving them real value versus the promotion. I mean, I've heard it said, 1 to 6, 1 to 10. I mean, what do you usually think of when you're leading business people?
Yeah. Whether you're doing a speech, a keynote, training, a webinar, especially on the front end where it's prospecting, where you're engaging people and you're saying, hey, I want to share some things with you. And then if you like it and you want more, I look at it as in terms of minutes. So in an hour webinar that we do, there's less than 10 minutes of the hour that's not content, right? So what would that be? 50 out of 60 minutes. So yeah. 85, 90% needs to be value, needs to be content. And then there's another danger, and that is that it becomes so obvious that all of your content is just the tease, nothing really that can be used. And the reason they're doing it is so that, you have to get the book, buy the program, join the course in order to get the rest. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm totally fine with giving some really deep, valuable content and then doing an overview or some things and just being honest and saying, you know what, if we had more time, we would go deeper. But if you like the first part, if that impacted you, then you're gonna love the program, right? I mean, that's a little bit of marketing, and that's how we, build relationships and stay in business. But there's got to be a big ratio, 80%, 90%, over 90% needs to be value. We do, and what I like to do on our webinars when we're introducing a subject and we're talking about becoming a coach or whatever the program is, I do an upfront contract. If there's any Sandler sales fans out there, they really big on the upfront contract. And what I say is, hey, I'm going to introduce who we are, and then I'm going to give you a ton of content that you can use that will help you in your life right now. And then at the end, I'm going to share with you a little bit about how you can get involved with us as a coach. And I'm going to go through our coaching system. Does that sound fair? And everybody knows. Okay. And so if there's, let's just use round numbers. If there's 100 people on there, they'll all say, man, this is fantastic. And then when I get to the last, 5 to 10 minutes, I'll say, hey, I want to share how you can get involved. They know I'm following through. And it's usually 5%. There's usually, 5 to 10 people who I could just watch fall off the webinar. And you know what? That's totally cool. That's fine with me. They were great participants. A lot of them come over and over again, and they're there to get filled up and to learn. And someday, maybe we'll have the right fit. But that's kind of how we do it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about some people, and again, I've heard, if you're talking about emails that you're sending out, people will tout different things, but just to think about how many times are you sending something out that's of just pure value? Is it 5 times and then you send a promotion? Is it 10 times? Whatever it may be, but for folks to get the concept there. And I was thinking about some people that I interact with. So Roy H. Williams, I've had him on the show before. It's been quite a while, but he has sent out forever his Monday morning memo. I get it. I always read it. It's not, probably half the time is it something that really resonates with me, but he's given me so much value, but he sends one article. So his weekly newsletter is one topic, one article, and it's only a page or so long. And then he always has underneath a PS, and it's an offering of some type. It's somebody, some product, some service, some event, something like that. And I know it, and I almost always look at it out of interest, but I just got, the value is the point of the thing. Tim Ferriss, most people know him for our work week guy. And he sends out, and I also get a 5-point Friday. The guy is such a curator of business service, personal services, health and wellness, whatever. And so he'll send out this, here's what I'm listening to. Here's what I'm reading. Here's, a great quote, whatever, 5 things. And I often find something of interest or value in there. And then after that, he always has an offering. It's whoever, who's sponsoring his show at that point or whatever. And I'll usually look at that, but the point of it is that value. So yeah, again, for us to look at, here's one right in relation to this. Ken Vaughn, he says, empty claims of how people can help improve without offering real results, not providing more than vague promises until you spend $497 to join the program. And he says, Kevin, you had Nick Unsworth on recently, and his Life on Fire challenge is free, so he can prove his value before asking you to spend anything. So that was show 801. And in that, you'll hear us talk about that he has his big offering, and they charged $1,000 for it. And then they went and charged $500 for it. And now today they give the exact same thing that they were charging $1,000 for. They give it away for free. So just as Ken's talking about, they give it away for free. You can go experience it. And now his their experience with it then is, or Nick's is, testimony is people are so grateful for the value. They got great value out. Now they come back then, and they do have big ticket offerings, a $2,000 program, a $10,000 program, to say, look, if you got value there, we can meet with you and help you go even deeper, get more out of that. And he's having more success with that. So he's actually making more money. It sounds altruistic, but he's making more money. He's a business guy. He's in it for a profit, but he is now giving it away for free. And, it's always a numbers game and what's best. But man, that is one where people get caught up on, how much. It's what you talked about, Tom. How much do I give away? If I give away too much, will they not pay for it? Generally, I see more success erring on the side of giving more away. Give too much away. Because over here on this side, if you're just teasing people and not giving them anything, it's really hard for them to trust whether or not there is going to be value or not, if they haven't experienced it to some degree. And I know you're doing this every day. I mean, a lot of these people listening here are on the Ziglar list. They get stuff from Ziglar, and we're always trying to figure it out ourselves as well.
Yeah. I mean, for everybody listening, just go to Ziglar.com and hunt around a little bit. You'll see a ton of free stuff. I mean, it's like we got it everywhere. And, we like to do that because if we can get you started, if we can prove the value of our content, if you understand that what we do services you, then when there's an opportunity that comes along that's a fit, you're more likely to invest.
Yeah.
One of my friends and mentors, Seth Godin, he has a very simple philosophy. His goal in every interaction is to scale trust. That's it. He says, whether it's email, on the phone, at a speaking event, if you trust him more after the interaction, then he's done his job. And this is a fantastic concept because in the book, Secrets of Closing the Sale, Dad said this. He said, there's 5 reasons that people don't buy. No need, no want, no hurry, no money, and no trust.
Mm-hmm.
And trust is by far the biggest reason that people don't buy. So what Seth was really saying is, hey, when I get people to trust me because I'm always trustworthy, that's the hard part, right? When I've figured out the hard part, then when I have something they need, they're just going to buy. So that's what I love. So for me, experts from the stage, scaling the trust, people online, scaling the trust, authors, scaling the trust. And so what happens? You make a big promise and you don't deliver, trust goes down. You make a little promise and you over deliver, you give more than they expected, trust goes up.
Hey, I've been guilty of those things in the past, Tom, times when I just out of a good heart, good intent, and I wanted to just promise so much, but man, the expectations are so high. It's almost impossible to meet it. So I hurt trust in the past doing that. Another way that I hurt trust myself, and I actually did this as recent as a couple years ago, we launched the product, and what people came back and said, man, it's interesting, but I'm just confusion. And I had somebody school me there. He said, man, especially on a website, if you confuse people, you lose. You confuse, you lose. And so it's an aspect of trust. Because when you confuse people, you're not clear on what your offering is. And again, man, it's such a hard thing to do for so many people. How can you, especially if you got something that is pretty in depth, has some complexities to it. We had an offering that required some education. We had to go totally retool everything because in the way that we presented it, it confused them. Well, this comes into some of what we've been talking about, but Tars Thomas, he says, it's getting to be so noisy from all the marketers. Teresa Loaded, she says, it's getting to be, again, so noisy. Wendy says, people bombarding me, promotions, right after you join their lists, passive income promises, leaving out the hard work that goes on in the front end, says Gregory. And I'm going to culminate these with this. Brian Gross says, the frequency of messages is such a big one for me. You don't need to reach me every other day. I know there's a delicate balance of this. I don't like messages that are all about them and take no effort to connect with me. When I market, I always give them an early ability to tell me to go away, but sincerity and humility are big components in my marketing to others. But the frequency, that is one where I have people, and I'll be candid that a lot of the guests I have on the show, I mean, I get involved with what they're doing and I'll go subscribe to their stuff. And it's interesting in the months that ensue, how many of them I'll ultimately sometimes, unsubscribe from because it's just too much. It's not that it's not good information. It's just, I just get tired of it filling my box. So just as we're talking about how often do we provide value and how often do we promote, there's also the aspect of regardless, how much do we contact them? And if you've got an email list, I think the going thought is, at least once a week, you need to send something out. And there's no perfect scenario here. And Tom, I know that you guys are, you have stuff that's going out frequently as well. If there's something of real value to offer, to send it out. But man, and this is something that we talk about. There's nothing new under the sun, but things do change. And as of this recording in July 2020, as it will be next year, it's always at an all-time high. We've got more media, more ability to communicate. And I think it's going to call us all back to refining and restructuring how we communicate with our audiences so we don't overwhelm them.
I tell you, we're guilty on this at Ziglar. And it's not intentional guilt. It's managing. It takes a lot of energy to manage this. And I'll give you the example. At Ziglar, we have programs that cater to the individual, somebody who just wants books and audio programs and online learning, self-study. Then we have people who want to be coaches. And then we have business owners who want help, systemizing their business. And then we have people who want to be a speaker or trainer. And these are 4 or 5 very distinct groups. And so one of them comes in and they're like, man, I want to know about that. So we start serving them. And then they go to our website and they go, I wonder what else they have. And they don't even know it, but they then subscribe to all 5 lists. And
yeah.
Right. And so what we try to do as an organization is to follow up 1 or 2 times a week, usually 2 times a week with everybody there. So there you go. I mean, that's a challenge that we have.
Yeah.
We have unsubscribe on every email, but that's what we do. I mean, but I wish we had the easy answer, and we've struggled with that. But
yeah.
I feel the pain, and Kevin, I do the same thing. I get on a ton of lists, and I'll either send them to a folder that I promise myself I'll check, and then I never check it.
Yep.
Or I just unsubscribe.
Yep. I unfortunately been unsubscribing a lot. All right. I got one more here that is relevant as we're talking about us who are in business. This as Sheamus, he says, signing up, or he says, it's what takes away credibility. Sign up and join me for a live webinar at X time. And then it's clearly a recording that could have been watched anytime. And we had somebody else talk about, I'm not seeing as I scroll down here, but somebody else talk about just the timelines, and the limits on certain things. And again, that's a difficult one because we know from marketing, I mean, you can do the test out there. If you put a promotion out that just says, hey, here's what we've got, a great product, great service, you're welcome to buy. We put that, you're going to get X amount of responses. If you put it out and there is a time limit, some urgency on it, or some scarcity, there's only this many, you will get more responses. That's a true story. And Tom, we know it is. And yet I cringe at it as well, because if you've got an electronic product, you can sell 1 billion. It doesn't matter. There's no limit on the amount of space, of electronic seats in that. Now we can have a viable deadline of saying, look, we're just going to offer this from this date to this date, and then we're going to stop. And I've seen people do that, especially even like for online communities, because you get 100 new members in there, man, it takes a lot of effort. And so it makes sense. And we're going to stop it at that point and service those people. So sometimes it is legitimate. With this guy, she was just talking about somebody who said, sign up for a live webinar, and it was actually a recording. That's lacking integrity. Obviously. I mean, you do those a lot. You have live webinars, and when it's live, you are literally there live. Now you'll tell people, hey, if you can't be there for the live one, the recording will be available. And again, for folks to hear from a marketing standpoint, if you do a live event online, which again is going to be recorded, people can listen to it, but you say, I'm going to do it here live, you will have more people show up for it. And I'll raise my hand. I hardly ever watch recordings, but if I get wind of something and it's going to be live at so-and-so time, I'll show up, even though I know this makes no sense. There's no reason I need to show up at that amount at that exact time because it's going to be recorded. It's just human behavior. And we think, hey, it's happening right now. We are that much more prone to show up. So here again, we're talking about, just like with email or correspondence, the balance of things that we know work, people respond to. And then over here, though, the ethics of it, or the honesty within it. And I don't have a magic bullet for that one either.
Yeah, I'll give everybody some Ziglar perspective.
Okay.
Growing up and what I learned from Dad and what I've seen is, we're not in the book and tape business. We're not in the seminar business. We're not in the webinar business or the certification business. We're in the life-changing business. That's the business we're in. We're in it to change lives. So years ago, famous story, Dad called Miss Lori. Miss Lori was Dad's personal assistant for 35 years. She's been with us 43 years now. And He said, Miss Lori, will you go through all the testimonials we've ever gotten? And this is probably 30 years ago now, or 25 years ago. Would you go through all the testimonials we've ever gotten? And would you find out, would you count them? And so she pulls all the stuff out. She kept everything. She called Dad back and said, Mr. Z, there's too many to count. We're going to have to weigh them. She was kind of laughing. And then he said, well, would you go through them? Not all of them, but a bunch of them, and find out what changed their life, because when somebody writes us a testimonial, it's because something in their life has changed. And he said, I want you to find out, was it the speech that changed their life? Did they hear me one time and that changed their life? Or was it the program? Was it the book? Was it the cassette tape program way back in the day? Was it the course they went through? And 99% of the people who said their lives were changed, it was because of the program. And so this is what we know about life change. There is no such thing as one and done. There's just not, right? When you hear a powerful message on the stage or on a webinar, it might be the catalyst that gets you to take action. And then when you invest in that course, that curriculum, that book, that whatever, and you read it and you think about it and you read it again and you listen to the audio program over and over again, that's what changes your life. Okay. So here's one of my issues with credible experts on the stage. And this happens often. They get up, they deliver an unbelievable presentation. I'm writing notes, I'm getting excited. And then at the end they say, oh, by the way, if you want to know more, just call me. In other words, I wanted more. I was ready to take action, but they didn't have a clear path, an easy way for me to get involved, to implement that into my life. So that's a missed opportunity. And so there's this real balance between, the other thing that peeves me is a 45-minute speech that's 44 minutes selling a program.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got two issues here, right? We got 44 minutes of selling and 1 minute of content. And then we've got 44 minutes of unbelievable content and a throwaway, oh, by the way. You see, if we're in the life-changing business, we got to give so much value that they want to know what it is. And then we got to make it easy for them to get involved. And this is a challenge because, like you said, time limit, scarcity, limited time bonuses, an incredible value stack, all of those things, those all move people to take action. And as somebody who has a passion and a conviction for what we offer, because it does change lives, I want to make it as easy for somebody to say yes right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Because if they don't say yes right now, every second that goes by, the likelihood is they're not going to do anything. And so our greatest competition in what we do at Ziglar is not them going to one of our competitors. You know what? In most of the cases, if somebody said, I'm choosing between you and X, my response would be, okay, just don't make the biggest mistake at all. And that's picking neither. Okay. Pick one of us because what you use and what you input, that's going to get you where you want to go.
Yep. Hey, you talking about that, a couple of things you said about 45-minute talk and 44 minutes of his selling. We had Pete Vargas on the show, who's just the master of stages. He was show 619. We're actually going to have him back on again. But he talks about, out of a 45-minute talk, you get to sell for 3 minutes. He tells you where to put that in, how to do that. He says, that's where you get to sell. Now, the interesting part though, is what he does is teach you how to give value for the entire talk and be leading people into the sell the whole way. So he's crafting that, but he says, man, you are giving them value. You get 3 minutes to literally sell and give them the way to take action, the call to action. And yeah, you talking about that, man, Tom, I know you've heard it so many times where I've heard people who they get a chance to be on a stage, whether it's an electronic stage, digital stage like this, or an actual stage. And they'll say, man, I'm going to give them all I've got. And I don't want to just come off like somebody who's selling something. So I'm not going to sell anything else. and you talking about that, the survey you did on the testimonials, and that it was Zig's message that got them to take action on the course. And 99% of people said it was the course that changed their lives. Really showcases that it's our responsibility to provide a way for people to engage in that message that they may be interested in. That is why, and I want folks to hear this, 99% of anybody we've ever had on the Ziglar Show, any guests, had a way for you to engage with them. Most of them have a book, of course, and it said, hey, if you got value out of this, here is a book. Some of them had an online course. I just talked about Pete Vargas. We talked a little bit ago about Nick Unsworth. Neither of those, Nick does have a book, but that's not their primary thing. Their primary thing is to engage with them, is to go be a part of their online course, their online community. I can think of one person that I've had on the show that had nothing else. They had a great message, but did not have a way to engage. I feel like that is like, it's my responsibility to bring guests on here, to bring messages on here. And if it is something that resonates with you, that here's the way for you to engage. And if somebody hears that and go, oh man, he's just trying to help them sell books, I'm sorry, but yeah, absolutely. Because I have them on the show because they have something of value to offer, and I want you to be able to engage. So I'm just grateful that you pulled that out. That's that right there. We need to talk about that more, that survey on the testimonials, that it wasn't the message. The message is what got them to take action. What changed their life was digging in, the course, the book, the online community, whatever it may be, that's where life change happens. Man, this is great. I think this is so good for all of us to hear, help us to understand what creates credibility in our offerings. And yes, so many of us, you, me, Tom, and so many of the audience here are leading people, they are influencing, or they want to. And to hear these things is golden, because if we don't retain our credibility, don't retain our trust. What's the quote? I keep trying to think of it on integrity. It takes a lifetime to build and a moment to lose, something to that degree that somebody said.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Well, hey, good stuff. It's got me think. I made a couple notes here for my own promotions just off the show.
Yeah. Well, I've got one more thing that I want to share.
Please. This
is a pet peeve of mine. There are programs out there that get sold from the stage, and it says, this is our soup to nuts cafeteria. Everything's right here program, right? And they're usually around a couple $1,000, $2,000 to $4,000. And then people will buy into that, right? And they get into it and they're like, wow, well, that section, that was really good, but it didn't go all the way. And so they're like, hey, I really need help in this. And then they say, oh, well, the super secret marketing formula is this course right here. We can add it on for X.
Yeah.
Right. And so they get into this continuous upsell loop. And I don't like the way those are positioned. And you're saying, but doesn't Ziglar do that? Well, we don't. Okay. We have a different philosophy. We have a different strategy. And in fact, when we started working with Howard Partridge, who does he's our exclusive small business coach. And what we offer is small business systems training, right? And we do it through, online, and, we have group coaching, and we've got this amazing back office that has hundreds of hours of content in it, of any system you could ever want to help systemize your small business. And we have different levels. And somebody would say, well, wait a second, you've got different levels, so aren't you doing the same thing? No, we're not, because here's the thing. In the entry level, all the content's there. It's all there. And as much time as you have, and you can go in and you can dig in as deep as you want. And you're going to have time in a group coaching format to ask the questions. The higher levels, what people are investing in is more one-on-one time.
Yeah.
Right. That's legitimate. That's the way it should be. And so to me, that's the way it should be positioned. And so I just wanted to share that pet peeve. Whatever
great.
Don't lead people in and say, hey, this is going to answer every question you've ever had. If it's not, right, just be upfront and say, this is what this does. And then, yeah, we have other programs, but that's designed for people who need more one-on-one attention, or more small group attention, or something like that, but you have access to the material.
Yeah. You're just talking about such a, from all of us to hit these things and say, of course we're in it to make income. If we can't make income, we can't provide anything to anybody because we can't do our jobs. But my gosh, to look at our tactics and say, is this about giving value or is this about just getting more money out of them, milking more money out of them? And we all got to watch it, man. Great stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. This is a great filter for us all to use. Thanks everybody who tuned in on Facebook. And as always, for the folks who gave the responses to this question. That's what makes these shows so rich. All right, man. I got some notes to put into place right now, Tom.
Be blessed. Thanks everybody. See you
Thank
next
you
time.
guys.